All right, welcome back to Specialness. I know if you're watching this sequentially, last episode was a little bit rough. We had a rough dismount. We didn't do our usual cute that's Kim, I'm Jeff kind of thing. It was a heavy episode. So we're happy to be back. And I'd like to assure everybody that there is a bit of a bounce to this episode. That was definitely a valley. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, definitely Valley.
It was definitely a valley. We never. It's not that Cason doesn't remain unstable here for a while, but that was by far the most tense situation that we probably experienced. So we're going to bounce back from here. Now we get back to just more normal, crazy stories as we go through ages 6 through 8 here, up to 9, 6 to 9. So going to cover about a 3-year period here. So picking up from that incident, the high incident, we were led to our loved and current psychiatric expert.
Yes.
And let's talk about how that recommendation kind of came to pass.
Okay, so like we've said before, we're very blessed to have been able to have Cason go to a school for special needs, learning different kids. And we have said over and over and over that
A small but mighty St. Timothy Christian Academy.
yes, and that if we weren't able to do that for him and for us, our journey would have been 100 times harder. And so we do keep in mind that a lot of families might not be in this situation that we were able to have him in this school.
And we'll talk about St. Timothy later. And how great it was, and how they've got some endowment now. So there are options for people that weren't there when we were there. But you're right. Not everybody has the wherewithal necessarily to do the things that we were able to do. But it was definitely a blessing.
A huge blessing. So the founder's wife of St. Timothy, her sister-in-law was the nurse, but she was young, and she was going to be a perfect fit for us. And
so we were told.
And that this would be a good fit because, as you know, we were leaving this very prominent doctor who said we need to institutionalize Cason, and we felt kind of abandoned, and we had no idea what to do.
And that was, obviously that was the only psychiatrist we had ever worked with.
Right.
So based on his reputation and what he said, I mean, we really didn't know what to do next. I mean, if that was the preeminent psychologist, we weren't sure what our options were.
Right.
So, and I've always wondered on what you think about this, because we never really talked about this, but does the fact that our first psychiatrist being as old as he was versus Dr. T, who we came to see, being much younger, I wonder, do you feel that played anything in this? But, do you think that
that he was old school?
Yeah, I mean, like that he, even though he was preeminent, had written all those books, maybe he was really set in his ways.
I think so. I think that probably did have something to do with it. I don't know, because as we will find out later, Cason's very unique, and
you can
most
say that again.
Doctors will never come across a case like Cason. So I don't know how much of it was that he's old school versus he really and truly was kind of baffled by Cason. So we end up getting to see her. It took about 6 weeks or so to get in to see her, and what a breath of fresh air it was to go in, and it was like, okay. She saw Cason, saw him literally running all over, bumping and crashing into everything, hyper as all get out. It didn't faze her. She just kept smiling, and we told her what we were coming from, and she was like, okay, I don't necessarily agree with the institutionalized theory, but let's work together. We're going to get this figured out.
Now, I remember after we left, we felt really good about that, but we also were quick to say to each other, look, she doesn't know what she's gotten into.
Right.
So for her to say she disagrees, it's based on this one appointment. So I don't
And
think
she had the records. She had his
but
records.
we're not out of the woods,
no,
is what we're thinking. You know, it's encouraging. It was encouraging, if nothing else, to just hear somebody say, I think institutionalizing a 6-year-old is not what we should do right now. But, you know, we were encouraged, but we were still, you know, we're still a little concerned about what our options would be.
Well, and the good thing is too, I mean, we told her about the lithium, and that was kind of the thing that sent the other doctor into that direction of institutionalizing, was that he needed more lithium.
Yeah.
And he was very hesitant to prescribe that. And she, after looking at the records and seeing Cason's behavior and listening to us, she was like, I agree. I agree. He needs a higher dose. So she did that. And then this is what starts our journey with 1,000 trillion different medicines that we still currently, at almost age 23, still
use a lot of them.
But not even that. It's just the journey that it's medicines constantly. We're having to change doses, deal with the side effects, go off one, go back on one. I mean, it's a journey.
A lot of people refer to it as the cocktail.
Cocktail.
And I think that because there is such a spectrum to mental health, nobody has the same cocktail, you know, if you're taking more than one medication.
Right.
So when you're dealing with a more serious case of mental health and you're going to require more than one medication, whether it's because of the multiplicity of symptoms or diagnoses that you have, or that you're having side effects to a drug and you need to take another drug to, you know, counteract the side effect of the other drug, developing that cocktail is something that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. And it's a journey we were on. We started it basically at age 6, and it still took us several years to land. Yeah. Several years.
Years. We have tried, but that was the beginning of the med journey. So he was about 6, a little over 6, when we started to see her. He's still in occupational therapy and speech twice a week for both. And seeing her very regularly. Like, I want to say there were times I would see her every other week, which is kind of unusual. And most of the time with psychiatrists, it's like, okay, we'll see you in 3 months or whatever. But we were seeing her a lot because he was hard and she needed to see him in person because it's hard. You know, I would come in with the list of behaviors and stuff like that, but for her to get eyes on him herself was huge.
And also, we were doing a lot of labs.
A lot of labs, which were taking hours.
Which were
and hours.
Still very difficult.
Still taking hours.
Still
and hours.
A massive drama of doing them. But the reason we were taking them was because, and she is still like this to this day, you know, she would make incremental bumps to a medication, and only one at a time.
Right.
She would make an incremental bump, and then we would have to check how that was performing physically within his body, as well as how he was responding to it mentally, and that required fairly regular meetings with her.
Right. So over, I would say, the next year or so, his behavior was better. We didn't have any violent attacks on us personally. His aggression was very prominent still, but he started to take that aggression out on our walls, on chairs, things like that, but it wasn't directed at me or Jackson or you specifically.
And I've always wondered what, you know, caused that to happen, because I don't think it was a medicine in particular.
Well, I think it was a mixture. I think medicine helped a lot. I think him, as he got a little older, we were able to, I don't know, reason with him a little bit, of just, you know, in the constant repetition of, you know, you don't want to hurt other people, you don't want to hurt our dogs, you don't want to hurt, you know, and so I would rather him obviously put a hole in the wall than hurt us.
It was just interesting that when he was so out of control at 5 and so incapable of, you know, taking suggestions or direction of any kind, that over the ages of 6 and 7, I guess what I'm saying is I don't know if it was a medicine or not. I can't pinpoint whether a medicine affected that behavior in any way, but the fact that his mindset was able to shift to the realization that he could take out his anger on
things,
other things
yeah,
instead of people.
right.
You know, that was, I'm just going to call that another blessing, because still looking back, to me, it's a beautiful mystery as to how that happened.
Yeah.
And I'm very glad it did.
Right.
Because it was.
And I also want to
rough.
make it very clear that, like what we were talking about in the last episode, every day, every minute of every day was not horrible. It was hard, but it wasn't horrible, especially when he was manic. Because when he was manic, his energy was through the roof, but he was funny.
Yeah.
And he laughed a lot.
It's almost like it shifted from being, because I think 5 was a pretty intolerable year. Like we walked around on eggshells. And it's not that we didn't walk around on eggshells in the time period we're talking about now, but it was more uneven, as opposed to being all the time,
Anger. Watch
out, he's going to be mad. He would
would
have good days and bad days,
yeah,
you know,
and good moments and bad moments.
Yeah.
But I just want to make that clear, that it wasn't 24/7 horrible us fighting with Cason. It wasn't like that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he had really good moments, you know, and like I said, the mania.
And that was, we weren't calling it mania.
No, we just called it hyper.
Yeah, and so this was the first time we were really kind of introduced to the term mania, and that he was, you know, suffering mania, which was, again, kind of unpredictable as to when and what would trigger that, because he was taking medicine regularly.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, I guess that was one of the ways we knew that it was maybe time for something to go up, is that the mania would start to be more prevalent as opposed to less prevalent. But his mania behavior was interesting. I mean, you're going to read a report later. She's got a sheet here. She's going to read from a live report from a new psychological eval we had, as opposed to the one we had before.
But okay, so what is the one incident that you can think of with the mania?
Well, this was we've already talked about, he would wake up it's not the middle of the night. He'd wake up at the beginning of the night. He'd wake up at like 11 at night and say he was up for the day. Mm-hmm. So that was still going on. Mm-hmm. But there was one night where he woke up and we were downstairs. You know, his bedroom was upstairs, and we heard him upstairs. It sounded like he was running around.
Right.
You know, so we just thought, oh, he's gone in the TV room. There's the little playroom thing, and he's in there and he's playing or whatever. Well, we go up there and he's not doing that. He's actually in the bathroom and he's staring at the mirror, like making faces to himself. He's making really strange sounds. He's laughing. Which, that was all kind of interesting. What was a little disturbing was he was wearing pull-ups and he had defecated in his pull-up, and he had pulled it down, and he was dancing in it. Mm-hmm. He was dancing in it. And I remember we were both like, because we didn't make that realization right off the bat.
Right.
You know, we were hearing the sounds, and I said, Cason, and he looked at me and he laughed.
Thought it was
I would literally describe it as he laughed maniacally.
Yeah. And
then he started to stomp around
and dance, literally dance and laugh. And you and I looked at each other like, this is not normal.
This is
okay.
This is crazy.
Yeah. This is very odd.
Yeah.
The fact that it didn't faze him. He thought it was the best thing ever.
You
just
know,
laughing.
And I think that's one of the things about mania is it's almost like he wasn't there.
Yeah.
You know, he was there physically, but I don't think he was there mentally. I don't even know. I'm not even sure he would remember it if we'd asked him about it a couple days later.
Yeah,
he was in his own
little world.
His own little world.
Right.
And of course, we called the doctor the next day. And that only happened one time.
That particular thing only
Yeah,
happened
that
one
particular
time. But stuff like that
thing.
was starting to happen quite a bit. And we also started noticing he would have fear of things
Yeah, the fear
that he didn't have before.
No, as a matter of fact, I remember the few times that we seemed to think that he was talking to imaginary friends or whatever. He wasn't afraid.
Mm-mm.
It was just like he was just acknowledging them. It was like no big deal. But now there was definite fear and concern.
Well, like he wouldn't do things like the pool. He wouldn't get in the pool. He would walk around
for various reasons.
But he would walk the perimeter of the pool. He became terrified of the dark. The dark. And he always had a nightlight in his room and stuff like that. But just weird stuff. So during that year, we would see odd behaviors, all that kind of stuff. And he was about 7.5, and Dr. T had suggested, maybe we need to do a psychiatric hospital stay, because she had, we'd tried all these different medicines. He's still on the lithium higher dose. And she was like, but gosh, he has all these behaviors still. Let's get another set of eyes on him.
And this was an interesting thing because, we had been, now that we're realizing what we're dealing with, we're starting to be aware of and watch, documentaries about kids with mental illness. What was the one with Janny? And,
yeah.
We're watching those, and we're hearing about them being in the hospital all the time, right? And we hadn't had to do that.
It's not that we didn't have to,
but we had just not done that yet.
Mainly because of how Cason was and how attached he was to us, and that when you do a psychiatric hospital stay as a child, well, even as an adult, but as an adult, you don't have your parents with you. You, as a parent, don't stay with them. You literally go and you drop them off, and you're like, bye, we'll come visit you tomorrow kind of thing. And knowing how Cason was, that we just kept saying was going to be so much worse for him. So much worse for him. And so we kind of fought through a lot that, even our current doctor would say today, it's pretty amazing that we were able to keep him out of the psychiatric hospital.
As long as we did, and as often as we didn't have to.
Right. There was many, many times where I think a lot of parents would have maybe hospitalized or chosen to hospitalize. I don't know. But we just kept thinking, we have a really good doctor. We see her every other week.
And this was she was suggesting an outpatient day program.
Yes.
Which was, as we're about to talk about, much more complicated, but it also didn't have the overbearing feelings of...
It was the same. It would be basically the same thing, except Cason wouldn't spend the night.
Right. He'd go in the morning and come home in the afternoon. And we thought, for multiple reasons, this was the better option. So, and we were able to explain to him it's kind of like going to school, because part of it was
school.
Learning and school stuff. So, we were able to kind of sell it differently to him.
Yes, and he fought us on it. Again, it wasn't like, okay, let's go. He did not want to do it, and getting him to go every single day for a month. So we spent the month of July.
It was a full month. It was 20 days.
Yeah, of going, and this is downtown, so it was a hike of a drive for us. So one of us had to drop him off and have a parent meeting, and then...
Was that every day?
Every day.
Yeah.
And then we would, when we pick him up, there would be another parent meeting, and in between that, there would be parent...
group therapy.
Yeah,
basically.
like group therapy.
Yeah, with other parents. That was once a week, I think.
Yeah, once a week. And then we would have to meet with the social workers there. And then we'd also meet with the psychiatrists that were seeing him. And then you would meet with the teacher. So it was a full-time job for us. Still, we had Jackson, this little kid, and so I was having to find people to help and family to help with him so we could go down to the hospital all the time.
Three.
Yeah. And it was hard. It was really hard. Because obviously you're getting a report every day on what they're seeing, and they would obviously say most of the time it's not, oh, Cason's had a great day, because there's a reason why he's in a psychiatric
as usual
hospital.
He was having good days and bad days, good moments, bad moments.
Yes.
And
when you first go in, they show you, this is our room. It's a padded room, and this is when the kids get aggressive and violent. We will safely restrain, and we will put them in there. It's all open. I mean, you can see in. It's not like it's a dark room or anything, but still, it's a padded room. And as a parent, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, my child will be in there. Cason was in there several different times throughout his stay. But it was good because a whole nother set of doctors and social workers and counselors got to observe him and kind of see what our doctor was seeing, see what the other doctor had seen, what you and I have explained. And they kind of were coming up with their own plan. But before they decided exactly what medicines and stuff they wanted to do, they decided to do a full another neuropsych eval on him. So that other one was when he was barely 5. Yeah. So this one, he was 7.5. Okay, so I'm going to read some of the observations from the psych eval, because I think it gives a good picture, again, of somebody else's description of Cason, not just coming from you and me that see him.
And just so you know, there are some people here that are, behind the scenes. Now, just remember, this is a serious thing. When you hear this, just don't laugh.
Well, the first part's not laughable. Maybe.
It
Okay, yeah. Let's just read it and see. Okay. So first, Cason is a cute 7-year-old with striking red hair and blue eyes. He willingly accompanied the examiners for testing and quickly engaged in the testing process. He was always eager to see us again on subsequent days. He was in constant motion as he tried to stay seated at the work table. However, he always complied when redirected and remained calm when pushed to complete activities he did not like. His mood was very liable. He was quickly elated and demonstrative when accomplishing something, and quickly frustrated and discouraged when tasks became challenging. He made almost constant noises, breathed heavily and loudly, and laughed hysterically at times. There was one incidence of hypersexuality. Cason, out of the blue, said, "Look at my belly button." He pulled up his shirt and then attempted to pull his pants down, saying in a whisper, "Look at my penis." Which, let's pause right there. Yeah. When you have bipolar,
right,
hypersexuality could be a huge problem.
This was the only time that we ever experienced it.
Yes. Even though Dr. T had warned us.
Watch out for this.
This is just knowing Cason. Okay. He was easily distracted from the work by his own off-task thoughts. He repeatedly requested snacks and attempted to bargain with the examiner to obtain food. When told he was only allowed one snack, he attempted to obtain the snack himself by opening the cabinet without permission. Subtle language difficulties were noted. For example, Cason put words in the wrong order. Example, "You can both drink them," instead of "You can drink them both." Also, he had difficulty with open-ended kind of questions. A child's play can provide a picture of their thought processes in unstructured situations. Cason immediately asked if the examiner would play with him, and he kept her informed of what he was doing, made eye contact, and smiled when engaging her. His play was characterized by imaginative use of toys, including the use of role play. However, he did not use objects in typical ways, and some content was plain bizarre. He personified trucks. One was a baby and one was the daddy. There was a lot of noises, squealing, crashes, and a frenzied quality throughout the play, with rapid transitions from event to event. A plane crashed. A pterodactyl is coming from the air vent or air conditioner and got hurt. That's good. He was evil. The truck danced. Then the baby truck copied the daddy truck and danced too. Cason drove the baby truck all over the room, over the examiner's arms and legs, and flung it back and forth from one side of the room to the other.
Right.
Asked if the truck was all right, he said he likes it. Cason put the trucks on this windowsill and said, The trucks will change to cardboard if they stay here. That's cardboard change land. They got away, and the baby truck began eating everything in the room, including the examiner's legs, the tires on the other trucks, and the file cabinet. Cason says, he likes to eat people. Out of the blue, he then says, when I see a pigeon, I say Pidgey. Hi, air vent. Are you a Pidgey?
Hi, air vent.
Are you a Pidgey?
Are you a Pidgey?
So I remember sitting down with his team, and they're going over all this and reading all of this. Now, granted, we'd seen some how he plays at home.
Yeah. I mean, we had to read it all in one little chunk. Makes it sound like it all happened kind of rat-tat-tat. I don't know if that was the case, but I mean, I can see it.
But no, I think it did.
Yeah.
She was describing, I mean, that's how fast his brain works. And it's just, he's all over the place. And they were just like, the hospital psychiatrist was like, it's literally fascinating to watch him because the trucks are over here and he's over there and they're changing to cardboard playland or whatever. I mean, it's really insane, really. So after we did all this, they all met. They 100% agreed he has bipolar. He's definitely experienced mania and depression, which I think I mentioned before, in children shows up as anger, irritability.
And again, very reassuring because our first psychiatrist said that he was too young to be diagnosed with that, and now we're getting, in addition to our new psychiatrist, we're also getting other people to say, yes, he has bipolar.
He has bipolar. The PDD, NOS, his dysgraphia and dyslexia really showed up big time in this because he was older. Interesting thing, his IQ had dropped from what it was on the first eval, which was a little alarming. It dropped, I would say, significantly. But the dysgraphia and the dyslexia was really, really evident. Like, he really couldn't.
Do you remember what his new IQ was?
Oh, I didn't bring it with me. It was...
The first one, it was like 108 or something like that.
Yeah, this was now, I think, in the 90s, maybe. Yeah. So it's not like he was below average, but it had dropped.
Yeah.
So then the new thing was they added an anxiety disorder to his list. And they were like, he still had, all the sensory issues and everything, but the fear, they said, okay, this is anxiety. So while he was in the hospital for that month, they jacked with all of his meds that we had worked hard to...
And this ends up being the reason why we don't like going to the hospital.
Yes. So we had worked really hard to get him, and he wasn't even stable.
No, but he wasn't stable, but he was
better
more stable than he had been in a long time.
Yeah. So we leave that month-long stay tired. He was tired. They give us a behavioral point system chart that he did when he was there during the day. We were to implement it.
He tolerated it while he was there.
Yeah. Coming home to implement it was another story. And it took so much time for me because it was like an hour every 30-minute point system. And it was a beating, and it didn't seem to help.
Well, and it's another thing that, your being able to be a stay-at-home mom made that possible. If you're not able to be home with your child, this was in the summer, obviously, so school's in session, but if you're not able to be home with your child, all day long, I don't know how you'd be able to implement this system anyway.
Right, because he had to earn
certain amount of points to have a certain amount of privileges, and it was daily,
hourly. I mean, it was like
as I recall, you earned your privileges for the next day based on your score at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it was constant check-in, and he had to practice his timeouts, and we had to practice his calming methods. I mean, it was, for me, a full-time job on top of 3 other full-time jobs.
Coping mechanisms.
Yeah, taking care of him and taking care of Jackson and every other thing a typical mom has to do. But the bad thing was, because they jacked with his meds, they had put him on a couple meds that he shouldn't have been on to begin with because he has bipolar. And
which isn't that interesting.
It's very interesting.
They should know that.
Yeah. And they thought it would help the anxiety.
Right.
In fact, it didn't. It just made everything way worse.
Yeah.
And they had lowered his lithium a little bit, so we had to go back. And so then we spent all this time going back to our doctor, and she's having to adjust his meds again. And that took a while to get kind of back on track. In the meantime, it's now time for him to do his OT eval, which you do, every year. And this eval came back that his fine motor skills, coordination, and balance were really bad.
Really regressed.
Really regressed. I mean, they had never been great, but they had regressed. And so he's 7.5, 8-ish.
He's probably
roughly.
8-ish now, yeah.
So certain points he was testing maybe as a 3-year-old. And they were concerned about it. And we were concerned about it. But at the same time that was going on, his movements and his tics had gotten a lot worse, and his movements changed. Like his doctor would see him, and she would kind of look at him, because she described it kind of as a rhythmic movement, kind of like he's dancing in a way. I can't even do it, but it's like this fluid movement, versus his tics were jerky movements, jerking of his head, blinking, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But this weird rhythmic movement concerned her, along with the fine motor skill, coordination, and balance being off. And so she suggests we go see a neurologist.
So we're now expanding the medical staff to include a neurologist.
Yeah, go see a neurologist and have him looked at with these movements or whatever. So,
and she left it at that, really.
Yeah, she didn't say anything.
Yeah, just we need to go. And she didn't even say she didn't even really say what we were looking for. She just wanted him to see it.
Yeah.
So we didn't think much of it.
No. So we go meet with this child neurologist. And
again, a preeminent.
Yeah.
Best in town or whatever.
Good right? Doctor. Well-known doctor, put it that way. And of course, Cason's Cason, and he's jumping all over the place, hiding under the tables and all that kind of stuff. But interestingly enough, this doctor, looked at him and watched his movements, and he looks at us and he says, is there any family history of Huntington's disease? And
first time we'd ever heard that.
First time we'd ever heard of it. And we were both like, well, he's adopted, so we don't know. I mean, we know some, but we don't necessarily know.
That was followed by, what is Huntington's disease?
Well, before that, we said, he said, are his biological parents alive? And we said, yeah, they're young.
They're 20.
And he was like, especially the birth fathers, he's still alive. And we're like, yeah. And he goes, does he have any neurological symptoms? And we're like, I don't think so. And then we're like, what's Huntington's? And that's when he told us, well, it's a fatal neurologic disorder that's highly genetic, and that most likely if one of his birth parents have it or is
a
carrier, most likely they would be showing symptoms at their age. And so he says Cason's presenting that rhythmic movement and his regression in the fine motor and balance and coordination. He was like, those are kind of the things that kind of start showing up. And he was young.
Yeah.
So he said, we need to do a brain MRI, another one. And
we know how that went.
Yeah. And we need to do blood work, a bunch of blood work.
And we know how that goes.
Right. And
this is also, we can rule out a potentially fatal disease.
Yes.
And that's the first time we were ever told that death was on the table.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, so this is 2010.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that, like a lot of things, the results of the blood tests and the MRI were not going to be immediate.
Right.
We had to go through a period of days, weeks waiting for the confirmation that he did not have this Huntington's disease. And of course, you Googled it when we got home, and that caused a stir. So
Right.
it was a tense time, as we were waiting for those results. It was another unique experience to live through.
And the fact that he is adopted, the neurologist had made it very clear. He was like, it normally not just affect his birth parents, but their parent. It's a very genetic thing, and we didn't have tons and tons and tons of history. I mean, we could have probably found out, but
well, they were all alive though.
They were all alive.
No one seemed to be exhibiting any of
that
these.
We knew of.
That we knew of.
We didn't know.
Right.
Yeah.
No one seemed to be exhibiting any of these symptoms, so we felt pretty good that it wasn't, but
right.
Until you know, you don't know.
Right. So thankfully, those tests came back, and he did not have Huntington's
Spoiler
disease.
alert, there is no Huntington's
There's no
disease.
Huntington's disease.
This is good. Okay.
He just has a movement disorder.
Tourette's We're going to leave it at that. We're not even going to call it Tourette's.
It's
We're
just a movement
disorder.
Right. Tics and whatever, on top of movements caused by
side effects from some of the medicines he's taking.
Yes.
So, an anxiety disorder, dyslexia, dysgraphia, bipolar 2, sensory integration disorder.
PDD.
And PDD.
Yes. Yes. So with all that information, we go back to our doctor, and she's glad to know.
Yeah, I was glad we don't have Huntington's.
And now she could treat his movements in a different way. And so that's when we started all those different, I think there were blood pressure medicines that really helped the movements and stuff. But then he would cap out on one, he'd get too high of a dose and the movements would come back. And it was just a constant going back and forth of meds until she said, you know what, there's a really good medicine that's used for Parkinson's, and there's some good things that it can help with his mood, and let's try it. And just like Abilify was, this drug, amantadine was,
and what's different, it was a liquid.
Yeah,
so it was, because we'd been through some antipsychotics that the pills were really huge. Cason couldn't swallow.
Yeah, not even just mood stabilizing.
Yeah, just mood stabilizing drugs.
And all kinds of stuff.
And so this being a liquid was
a lot easier.
Yeah, and we could flavor it, so it was easier to give it to him. That was a plus.
Yeah, that was a big plus.
Yeah.
And we take it or give it to him, and very quickly, Cason was calm. He wasn't moving everywhere. Like the tics were almost gone. I would say maybe 2 weeks in, I mean, his mood was so much better.
Mm-hmm. It was like Abilify all over again.
Yeah, we were like, oh my gosh, this is a miracle drug. I hope he can stay on this forever.
Why'd you say that?
I know. That's probably what caused the problem.
Yeah.
So she would increase it a little bit, and he was on it for a couple months. And
it was a great 2 months.
Great.
Yeah.
So
it was like being, I think it's as close to being normal parents as we had at that time.
I mean, it's not, again, Cason's not.
Of course. I'm just saying from
what
our perspective and what we're used to, it felt pretty normal. It wasn't, but it felt much better.
And that's something we haven't really talked about up to this point. So Cason's 7.5, 8-ish around. We're really starting to see the isolation of having a special needs child.
Yeah,
because at this point, all of the I don't know, the people that were kind of in our lives when Cason was little and he would we'd kind of hang out with them, not blaming them, but their lives went on. Their kids got into elementary school.
They're
their
playing
kids
soccer. They're doing
and
things. Yeah.
Cub Scouts and going to church that we went to and then we're no longer able to go. We became very isolated. Our world was shrinking real quick. Our life really consisted of doctor's appointments and therapy, and that was pretty much it.
And anything regarding this little school we were going to.
Right. We weren't the family that oh, let's go to a restaurant, let's go to dinner tonight, because we knew what that would entail. It was hard.
And I don't think we realized it until we realized it.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like it was this gradual thing. It just felt like one day, we were just not socially involved.
Right.
And it was, and I remember at the time thinking, well, this will work out. Well,
But I think
we learned over time that that's a big part of families like ours. It's nobody does it intentionally, but you do get left behind.
You get left behind, and you are in your own world, and it's hard. I mean, like we didn't, people would go on spring break trips or go skiing at Christmas or do whatever. I mean, not everybody does, but a lot of people that we knew were doing those things, and we never traveled. We would go once a year to my whole, my side of the family. We'd always go somewhere, but to put Cason on a plane, no way. So we would drive, and then that would be an ordeal. Like it would take.
Well, up to this point, he's 8. We had taken one trip when he was 4 to a friend of mine's wedding in California.
Just you and me.
Just you and me, yeah. Just you and me had taken one trip to California for a wedding. We were gone like 4 days.
Long weekend, like 3 days maybe.
Yeah, and felt okay, This is before a lot of the diagnoses and stuff like that. He wasn't even really in school yet. But we hadn't done that. We had been able to take a family vacation with our entire family, go to Florida, with all the cousins and stuff. But boy, that every year we did that got harder because he was,
wouldn't put sunscreen on, and everything was a battle, and
didn't like the way sand felt. The ocean was too loud, and
out of his routine.
Couldn't sleep at night.
No,
and,
get very angry over things, and when you're out of your environment, it just makes it hard. And then he's around his cousins, who several are the same age of him, and as
they're trying
parents,
to figure out what he's
they're
doing.
trying to figure out, why is he acting like that? And then we're looking at these kids and saying, wow, that's what it's like to have children, because that's not our experience. And you would have to, remember, you'd have to put him in the car to pretend to go get gas.
I would have to put him in the car in the mornings, because he would get up, and he'd been up forever.
Hours.
And he would be yawning and stuff, and even to this day, he doesn't nap. He'll tell you that. That's just something he doesn't do. So what I would have to do is I'd say, hey, Cason, I need you to help me. I got to go get gas. And we'd get in the car, and I would drive about 100 feet. He'd fall asleep, and I'd drive around or park.
For like 2 hours.
For like 2, sometimes 3 hours. And as he'd start to wake up, I would quickly put the car back and drive and be like, wasn't that? I'm glad we got the gas and heading home. And, he didn't understand time. So he didn't know we were getting home at lunchtime, and everyone had already done a bunch of things and
right.
stuff.
But that was a typical vacation for us.
It wasn't a vacation.
It wasn't a vacation for us.
No,
it wasn't a lot of work. We were so tired. And
having to bring all the medicine.
And we had to drive.
Because we couldn't fly.
Flying was not an option with him for safety reasons.
Yeah.
It was safety.
Not just for us.
Right.
And like for other passengers.
Yeah. And it was an ordeal. And so as Cason got older, and Jackson's getting older, and Jackson's in preschool or whatever, and he's around neurotypical kids and their families, Jackson starts asking questions. Why are we not doing this? Why are we not doing that? And it's really hard to say, well, Cason can't handle it or whatever.
Can't do
it. But that was kind of the beginning of where we noticed, like, gosh, we're living in a completely different world.
So we're going through all kinds of transitions in 2010.
Yeah.
We're really struggling with trying to get Cason on solid ground, which we're nowhere close. It's uneven ground. And we're feeling isolated, We're really just trying to get through every day. We're trying to get to the end of the day. And it would still be years before we would get to the point where we would put the kids to bed and feel like, oh, we have some time to ourselves or whatever. Because at this point, by the time we're getting ready to go to bed, he is getting up for the day.
Right.
And that's an ongoing problem for a couple of years.
Yeah, long time.
So sleeping is weird, and it's all weird.
Everything's weird. Okay, so back to the amantadine. Amantidine's doing great. We're loving it. Cason's calmer. Things seem so much better.
And you said, I want him to be on this the rest of his life because this is the greatest thing ever.
Yes.
Which was, you cursed us.
I cursed us. And we started noticing Cason doing weird things. Like the fear intensified significantly.
You're about to talk about the yogurt.
The what?
The yogurt trip. The frozen yogurt trip.
Oh, yeah. Well, I forgot about that. Yeah, that was...
that was probably it sticks out in my mind as being the most exemplified form of fear I saw him have.
Yes. Okay. So part of the point system from the hospital.
Right.
And remember, we had mentioned before, Cason was having bathroom accidents all the time. And so one of the suggestions and things were, which we had already been doing, but we just...
I remember we had also talked about, he was saying it was stupid to go to the bathroom.
Right.
So right now we're thinking this is a decision on some level, right? We're going to find out that's not all there is to it.
Right. So this one afternoon,
broad daylight,
like on a weekend. I think it was just like
Saturday. I mean, it was still summer, so it was.
And we were like, okay, let's go get frozen yogurt. And Cason was excited, Jackson was excited, and we said, okay, but before we go, we need you to go to the bathroom, and then we'll go. And the bathroom from where we were by the back door is literally down a hall.
I mean, like you can, from where we're standing, I'm visually looking right now. I'm visually in our house. 20 feet away is the toilet. And from where we're standing, you can see it.
You can see it. Like the door's open.
Open.
Bright, whatever.
It's daylight outside. The lights in the bathroom are on. And this is, you can't even call this a hallway. It's the length of.
It's a little hallway. Nothing.
It's like 5 feet.
Yeah, just a little hallway.
We have the light on in the hallway. Mm-hmm. It's totally lit up.
Right. And he refuses to walk past a certain...
Well, to get about 3 feet away from us.
Right.
And he is staring intently in the bathroom.
And we're like, Cason, all you have to do you want to go get frozen yogurt? Yeah. Then let's go to the bathroom. And he would not. Like, it was as if there was a barrier there, and he could not pass this point. And you were like, buddy, there's nothing in here. Come on, let's go. And you walk in there.
I went in there, and I'm asking him what he sees in there. And he said, there's a man. Mm-hmm. And I said, where? And he said, right there. And he's still pretty far away. But I'm walking all over the bathroom.
Yeah, you're opening the cabinets.
I'm waving my hands. I'm like, am I touching him? Is he here? And he's not really responding.
No, he's just adamant, and he gets very frustrated and mad. And so we're like, well, because we're following the rules.
Because we're following the points rules.
We don't give in to behavior.
Right.
And so we're like, okay, well.
Now we can't go get yogurt.
We can't get frozen yogurt because you won't go to the bathroom. And he throws a massive fit and stuff. And finally, he gets over it. And we're just like, God, that's so weird. There's not a man in there. What's going on? And
well, and it wasn't, I don't know that it was so much that we were like, there's no man in there. It was more like I went in there.
Yeah.
And I was demonstrating to him that if there's a man in here, he's either not doing anything to me or he's not here.
Right.
And he just couldn't get there.
He couldn't get there. So he's on the amantadine. He's on an antipsychotic at this time called Zyprexa.
And we've been through like
four different antipsychotics. But this particular antipsychotic had worked very well for him, and it made his movements a little bit worse. But he had to be on a pretty high dose of that. But he was having breakthrough behaviors of this fear.
No, talk about what you mean by the word breakthrough.
Like
a breakthrough behavior. What is that? What are you saying?
He would be somewhat stable, and then out of the blue, he wouldn't walk on our carpet in the TV room.
Right.
And be like, Cason, why aren't you walking on the carpet? And he wouldn't say anything, but he'd just be adamant he won't walk on the carpet. And I'm like, then I'd try not to be frustrated, but I'm like, I need you to come in here, whatever. And then one day he'll kind of look around and he'll be like, I'm not going to walk over there. And we're like, why? And he's like, there's a snake. I'm like, there's not a snake. I go over there and I'm looking, there's no snake. And he goes, there's a snake there. And he's adamant that there's a snake there. And I'm like, there's not a snake there. The dark, every light in the house had to be on at all times. Our couch pillow, he named Pillowy.
Yeah, that just came up one day. He just said, oh, Pillowy.
And the pillow was real to him.
Yeah.
Like, we couldn't sit on the couch with the pillow right there because it was hurting.
You couldn't lean on it.
Pillowy.
You couldn't, like, if you were just going to take it and kind of throw it over on the, so more people could sit on the couch. He didn't like that.
No, and if he thought you hurt the pillow, he'd go over and hug and kiss the pillow. And it was like a real person to him. Yeah. So our doctor has suggested, because he was so afraid at nighttime, she had suggested...
And by the way, I don't know that this isn't terrible advice to just anybody in general, with young kids. Who are afraid of a monster in the closet.
Yeah.
You don't have to be an extreme mental health case for this maybe to work. So this just throw this out there for anybody.
Right.
It's a good suggestion.
So she said, and we had gone in to see her, and so she was talking with him about it. And she was like, Cason, your mom has something called monster spray.
Monster spray.
And the monster spray will make anything that you see or anything you're afraid of go away. And I'm sitting there looking at her going, I have monster spray and stuff. And come to find out,
Yeah, I was wondering where this was going. It's just a water bottle.
A water bottle, a spray bottle with water in it. But Cason didn't know there was just water in it. She was like, don't let him see you fill it up, but let him spray. And I was surprised on how much he sprayed. I mean, literally his room, he was in there just spraying his whole room. The part of the floor
was damp,
was wet. I mean, and he would carry it around with him and spray. And I was like, oh, and I would be like, oh, is the monster spray working? He's like, yeah, it's working. But he became kind of attached to it. Like, he had to have this monster spray.
Yeah, it became,
like security.
Like an addiction, like a security blanket. Yeah.
So that was happening. But the amantadine, at a pretty decent dose, we started seeing weird, and I say weird because I don't know how else to explain it.
No.
Weird. But like one night, we're getting him ready to take a bath or whatever, and he starts just doing this in the air.
Yeah, and he didn't say anything.
No, he's just doing this, and
just
we're like
wiping the air.
And we're like, Cason, what are you doing? And he'd look at us like everybody does this, and he said, oh, I'm wiping the pictures away. And we're like, pictures? What pictures are you talking about? And we just kind of like, okay. And then he would be in the shower, and we'd always have to help him and, do stuff. And
yeah, he is taking showers now.
That's right. But he would stand at the back, not towards the front, because he said bugs were coming out of the drain.
Yeah.
And he was like so fearful, and he'd, back up. And
spiders, right?
Spiders and red beetles. And we're like, there are no red beetles.
And I'm doing the same thing. I'm touching the drain. I'm right there. And this day, I wonder if he just saw them just crawling on my hand. I don't know.
And then one night he freaks out.
Oh,
this
was scary.
This was scary. He thought he had a needle in his arm from like when he's getting blood test, and he would not bend his arm. He was holding it out, screaming in pain. To get the needle out. And of course we're like, okay, there's no needle. So I call. Of course, this is late at night.
Friday.
I call his doctor. And I'm like, okay, what's happening? What is all this? And she was like, I think he's hallucinating. We need to increase his Zyprexa, the antipsychotic, but it could be a side effect of the amantadine, a rare side effect of the amantadine.
We heard that.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, darn it. Like, this medicine was working so well. So she says, let's slowly wean him down a little bit and see if the hallucinations kind of go down. In the meantime, we had increased the Zyprexa, so to kind of counteract that. And again, when you wean off drugs or wean down, it's a slow process. It's not like you'll be done in a week. I mean, it was a slow process. And one day, it was a Friday.
Of course it's a Friday.
I go.
It's always a Friday.
Pick him up from school, and he is not acting himself at all.
Now, let's clarify. Usually when we say that, he's super pissed or super moody. No. He is not like that at all.
Almost drugged acting, and so
like
sluggish.
Like sedated.
Sedated. Like, very hard to get him to respond. Just very lethargic, just kind of, and I was like, oh, he must be getting sick. And so that night, I made dinner, and he really didn't want to eat much, and
which is unusual. He's an eater.
He's an eater. He wasn't drinking a lot, which is a red flag, because when you take lithium, you have to drink a lot of liquids, and you're supposed to go to the bathroom a lot, keep the lithium flushed out.
Flushing through.
And we kind of noticed, I was like, I don't think he's gone to the bathroom since he's been home from school. And so we're like, Cason, let's go to the bathroom. And he would be like, he didn't have the energy. And he was like, I don't feel like I have to go to the bathroom. And so I'm like, this is kind of weird. Let's keep an eye on him. Maybe he is just getting sick. And so that night I made the decision, we're not going to give him his lithium, that one dose. I'm like, we're not going to give him his lithium because obviously, he's not drinking a lot. He's not peeing a lot. That's not good. And let's see how he is in the morning. And come Saturday morning. Yeah. We go in, and he's not up yet, which
is weird.
Weird.
Super weird.
And we get up at 4 or 5 right. And go in, and he's just kind of laying there, not real. It was weird. I mean, it was just.
He was awake.
It was weird. And I was like, Cason, but do you feel okay? And he was like, no. And I was like, well, let's come down. I checked. He did not have a fever. I said, let's get something to drink. He didn't want anything to eat. He didn't want anything to drink. And I was like, okay, this isn't good. So I called his doctor, and she calls me back. She answered. They were at the Fort Worth stock show.
Well, it's the weekend. They're doing something fun.
And I'm explaining her Cason's symptoms, and she was like, not good. Go downtown.
To the emergency room.
And we're like, okay.
So this is going to be our first ER trip.
And so we scramble, call my parents. They come and get Jackson, and we make the trip downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And little did we know we would be there a week, and that's for a whole nother episode.
That just our stay at the hospital is an entirely different episode. So we'll pick up there next week. See, this wasn't as
traumatic.
It's not as traumatic. We're just going to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna have our first hospitalization. So that's Kim.
That's Jeff.
And this is Specialness. We'll see you next week.